As a craft and DIY expert, I'm always keeping my eye on trends. And what I've noticed this year is that epoxy resin crafts are on the uptick. There are so many different things that you can make with them. My team and I have loved working with epoxy resin for the past few years, but we haven't found one that we loved until we just discovered the brand new Aleene's epoxy resin. Number one, the first thing I noticed about working about it is that it was low odor, which is a huge game changer. It's a two-part mixing system. So today, I'm gonna show you exactly how it works, and we're going to make pressed flower coasters. These are a great gift or to display in your home. You guys ready? Let's get started. For today's project, we're going to be using the following: Aleene's clear casting and epoxy resin, silicone coaster molds. I've got a square, but you can use any shape, craft sticks for mixing, a heat gun, gloves, pressed flowers. You can buy pre-pressed ones at the craft store or press your own, a tweezer, and a handful of plastic cups. For the first step of our project, we're going to mix up the epoxy resin. Now, as you'll notice, I've got my safety gear on, so it's always really important to fully read the instructions that come within your packaging. And you want to make sure that you follow these instructions very carefully. You cannot deviate when you're working with epoxy resin. I've got my protective gloves on. You also want to make sure that you're in a well-ventilated room. I've got 2 masks. Even though it's low odor, we still recommend that you wear a face covering. And I've also got safety goggles. All right, so as we get started, make sure you double check your instructions, but it is a 1-to-1 ratio. So we're going to pour 1 part of hardener and 1 part of resin in 2 separate cups. You either want to make a mark on your cup so that you have a measuring line to pour to, or if you've got cups like I do, they've already got lines that I'm going to use to make sure that my parts are equal. With our hardener in 1 cup and our resin in the other, and remember to double check that you have equal measurements of both, we're going to take a 3rd clean cup, and we're going to pour both of these into our clean cup. I'm going to take one of my stir sticks, and I'm going to scrape the edges of each cup to make sure that we get all of it out of each cup. Also, remember to double check that your surface is covered. I've got craft paper on mine, but you may want to put a drop cloth or plastic down. Once both are in the same cup, we want to stir until we do not see any streaks. This could take 3 to 5 minutes. Make sure that you set your timer because it is important to follow those instructions. As you're stirring, make sure to scrape the bottom and the sides of the cup. Once you don't see any more streaks in your mixture, you'll want to again set your timer for 2 more minutes, continuing to scrape the edges and the bottom as you're stirring. Once you're done mixing, after 2 minutes, we're going to take another clean cup and we're going to transfer this mixture into our clean cup. We're going to take another stir stick and make sure that we scrape the edges of our cup to get all of the mixture out into the new cup. Once your mixture's in your new cup, you're going to want to mix for 1 more minute. All right, now that we're ready to pour our epoxy, we've got all of our supplies out on the table. Remember, you've got about 25 minutes of work time once your epoxy is mixed. You also want to work in a spot where you can leave your project to cure for 24 hours because we don't want to move it. All right, so to get started, our first step, we're going to take our cup of mixed epoxy resin and we're going to pour a light layer in our coaster. So we're using our pre-pressed flowers and I'm going to use a tweezer. Now, you could try and put them directly in the epoxy, but what you might encounter is air bubbles. So what I recommend doing is taking each piece of your dried flowers and lightly dipping it in the epoxy to give it a small coating. Let it drip. And then as you're placing it on your coaster, you want to keep in mind that you're working backwards, because the actual part that's facing up will be the bottom of your coaster. So you want to make sure that your design is actually being placed upside down so that once you take your coaster out of the mold, you'll be able to see the front of it. Once you're satisfied with your design, you're going to need a heat gun. The purpose of the heat gun is to eliminate air bubbles that are going to pop up in your coaster. You want to use your heat gun on a low setting to start and slightly glide it above the surface. Do not let it touch the epoxy and do not hold it in one place for too long. You want to keep an eye on your coaster for the next 30 minutes. If you do see any air bubbles pop up, just whip out that heat gun again and slightly glide it across the surface to pop those bubbles. Now, if you have more of your silicone molds, you can make a whole set of coasters at the same time. But we want to make sure that we let each one cure for 24 hours. That may vary a little bit depending on where you live and what your humidity is like. So at least 24 hours, but you may need to let it go a little bit longer. All right, so we're gonna let this cure, and then when you come back, you're gonna get to see all the fun coasters that I created. It's been 24 hours and it's time to check out what our coaster looks like. So all you've got to do is simply peel it back from your silicone mold and flip it upside down, and you have your design. Check out, I did a few different ones. I think that this orangish daisy looking one is probably my favorite. So you can vary these up to create an entire set. I don't know about you, but I think I'm gonna be making a lot more coasters. You can find out more about Aleene's epoxy resin at Aleene's.com. You can shop it and find out where it's available at retailers. And I want to know, what kind of projects would you make? So in the comments, tell us what's on your project plan when you get the new epoxy resin. As always, make sure to follow me at Craftbox Girls and over at craftboxgirls.com for more creative projects using my favorite Aleene's products. And check out Aleene's on social for lots of ideas. Happy crafting!